everybody, I'm Brandon with Spyderco, and today on the Edge-U-Cation series we're going to be talking with Mike Janich about the compression lock.
Hey Brandon, the compression lock is actually something that goes back to the year 2000. The very first one we ever did was the Gunting knife designed by Bram Frank. Nice piece of history. This goes back again to kind of the first generation of this particular expression of the lock. This also, for the fans of paramilitary 2s, when you go back to the first generation Para 1, this was also one of the first compression locks, and also my original Yojimbo design. When you look at these, what's interesting about them is compared to the current compression lock, the detent mechanism is different. We can get into the details of that a little bit more as we look at some of the specifics of these, but the most common question we get about compression locks is, it's just a liner lock on the back of the knife, right? So if we look at the inside of the knife, here's a cutaway that I made up. This is a tenacious model that's cut away. And what you can see with the liner lock is that the ramp on the tang of the blade faces back toward the butt end of the handle, okay? So when you open this up, that liner is under spring tension. It moves over onto the ramp, wedges against the ramp, and that's what gives you your locking action. If you apply pressure to try to close the blade, what typically ends up happening is that you either push the liner off of the ramp under extreme pressure, or what's going to happen is because it's a pretty long spring, it's going to bow in the middle and it'll still slide off that liner. That's how that gives up. So that's a traditional liner lock. When you look at a compression lock, what you've got is a very different lock mechanism, different mechanics overall. So what you've got instead is a ramp that faces upward toward the spine of the handle when the knife is open. That ramp also faces up toward the stop pin. So the stop pin actually does double duty on this. When you open up the blade, what happens is it restricts the rotation of the blade when it hits the open position. But also you notice now that the liner, when it slides over, there's still a ramp on the tang of the blade, but that liner is actually between that ramp and the stop pin. So when you try to apply that pressure, instead of just trying to push the liner off the ramp or bend it out of the way, what it's actually trying to do is crush that liner, crush the liner this way between the ramp and that stop pin. So that's where compression comes from. You're actually compressing the liner rather than just trying to push it out of the way. It's a much stronger lock. It's just mechanically very different than a liner lock, even though the operation as far as the release looks pretty much the same.
So one thing we have at Spyderco is CQI, constant quality improvement. Things change and evolve over time. How has that evolved with the compression lock over time?
That's a great question. When you look actually at the very first compression lock, what's interesting about it, we go back to the Gunting. If you look at it, it is actually a left-handed compression lock. So that was one of kind of the unique things about it. Bram Frank is actually left-handed. His operation for closing the lock was actually even operating it right-handed. It was designed to release the lock with the thumb. When you look at the early, the paramilitary, the original first generation version, or the Yojimbo first generation, these are set up the way the current compression locks are. And what you'll also notice, you can see this best on the little temperance. The detent on these, you can see that little cutout right at the tang of the blade on the side of the blade, so it's machined into the side. That's actually the detent. So when you close that, what happens is the full cross-sectional dimension of that lock bar goes over and drops into that detent. So instead of the ball bearing detent that we currently use, which is actually a lot more efficient, it's a lot easier to create the detent tension that you want, especially when we start doing like compression lock flippers and that type of thing. The original ones were actually set up this way. When you look at the evolution, historically, we've actually done integral compression locks as well. So when you kind of take that concept of a reeve integral lock, where you've got more of a frame lock mechanism, the lock bar is actually built into the full frame scale. This is one of the old school ATRs. This one actually, if you notice, it says Taz on it. And for those of you out there on the Spyderco forum, you know who that is. So you know where this knife came from. But that is a compression lock that is actually integral to it. So it's evolved over time. When we look at the full evolution, if we take it all the way up to our current, some of our latest offerings, we got our smock. This one is a compression lock. You notice there's no cutout on the back here because the lock release is actually operated by this button. So you press the button, that's what releases the lock. Makes it even more user-friendly. You don't have to worry about trying to get your fingers down into that lock well. So it really has evolved pretty significantly over time.
So the compression lock has clearly come a long way. It continues to evolve. What are some of the advantages of the compression lock? What's it best suited for?
Again, when you look at the mechanics of it, strength-wise, it is significantly stronger, at least has the potential of being significantly stronger than a liner lock. So when you're looking at knives, like for example, this one's near and dear to my heart, the Jimbo 2, one of my designs. This one, designed for personal defense, you want something that has extreme lock strength. So when it comes to Spyderco's evaluation of that, we use the bender breaker to be able to test our lock strength and actually quantify how strong our locks are. This one is NBC rated, which means that it'll hold 200 inch-pounds of pressure per inch of blade length. So when you look at being able to maximize the potential of lock strength, compression lock is one of the few locks that can actually achieve that. What's also great about it, when you look at a typical liner lock, when you're gripping the liner lock, one of the things that you'll notice is that you're actually putting your index finger in contact with the lock. For normal use, absolutely no problem. If you're using it really hard, especially if you're trying to do any kind of a twisting action or anything, you need to be careful that you don't inadvertently release the lock. When you look at a compression lock, however, the lock release actually typically will nest into the web of your thumb. So even if you're gripping this thing tight, what you've got is all soft tissue around this area of your hand. There's really no way that you can inadvertently or unintentionally release that lock and have it close when you don't want it to. When it comes to actually closing it, one of the things with a liner lock is you have to release the lock, kind of move the blade a little bit to start its closing action, and then get your thumb out of the way to finish the action. So for a moment there, essentially your thumb is in line with the edge. So you just have to exercise some extra care when you're closing it. With a compression lock, what's nice about it is you get this pinch grip. You have your thumb on the outside of the scale here, index finger is here. You simply squeeze that, swing the blade down. So now you have one hand opening, one hand closing, and you never get your fingers in the path of the edge. So just from an operational standpoint, it offers a lot of advantages.
So really the lock isn't just about strength, it's also about the ergonomics, how you can use it, how you can easily open and close a knife.
Exactly. When it comes down to just user friendliness, ease of operation, and also safety of operation, especially for people. If your way of using a knife, if you're holding on to something, you have to open your knife, cut it, and then be able to stow the knife safely without letting go of whatever that might be. If your requirements demand that type of thing, the compression lock can be really user friendly for that type of application.
And you mentioned we have the original models were actually left-handed. Are there any left-handed compression locks now?
The Paramilitary 2 is currently available as a left-handed compression lock. It's the only one we currently have in the line, so for lefties, it's more of a limited offering. But it doesn't mean that you can't operate this left-handed. You can also, when you look at the way you would normally close, say, a back lock for Spyderco, you could also operate this left-handed. So what I do when I do this lefty, I'll put my thumb in the lock well to release it, and I'll drop down so the base of the tang touches my index finger here. So again, my finger is not in the way of the edge in any way. Simply switch my grip and close it.
So really a simple lock to operate either hand, either way you want to use it.
Yeah, like anything else that we make, we design it with ergonomics in mind. We design it with ease of use and that user friendliness in mind. But if you're a lefty, sometimes, as lefties all know, you have to change gears a little bit and kind of adapt to whatever the tool might be. But we try to make that as easy as possible.
So one thing about the compression lock is you see it on a lot of Spyderco knives, but you don't see it really used outside of Spyderco. Why is that?
The compression lock is actually a patented lock. When you look at patents, you have two basic types of patents. You have a utility patent, which is actually intellectual property on a proprietary invention, something that is truly unique from a mechanical or a process standpoint or something like that. And then you have just a design patent. This is actually a utility patent, which means that went through all the formal paperwork and everything to have the patent office assess it. It was granted a patent, so it is Spyderco's proprietary intellectual property.
So we've really gotten into the compression lock and learned a lot about it, but what would you say is the most important thing Spyderco fans should know about the compression lock?
Well, at Spyderco, again, we believe in education. So the most important thing is to understand how the lock works, how it is different than a liner lock mechanically, how its operation offers some significant advantages as far as how you can operate the knife, being able to then open it and close it very easily. Just that ease of use. And it's like anything else, the more you learn about something, the more you can kind of evaluate it as far as your personal needs. There is no one size fits all when it comes to knives, so when people are looking for a Spyderco knife that fits their specific needs, the more they know, the more empowered they are, and the better they can make a choice.
Sure. Well, that's a lot of great information. Thanks for that, Mike. We've covered a ton of ground on the compression lock today. Gotten inside, learned a lot about it, its history, what it's used for, its strength, all kinds of different things. And That's just the first in this series. There'll be a lot more to come soon, so thanks for joining us.